Take his weapon away. He is not authorized to carry arms." The command rang out across the Fort Irwin training ground, like an order to execute. A frail old man with silver hair gently set his XM4 rifle on the sand. But in that instant, everything spun off its axis. Just 83 seconds later, 5 elite soldiers lay face down in the scorching desert grit. No one saw clearly how he struck. And the only question hanging in the blistering air was, who is that man? The command echoed like thunder across Fort Irwin's sun-baked training ground in California. Some recruits jumped and turned. Others merely glanced over before hurrying on. But inside the training circle, where sand and sweat merged, the old man remained unmoved. He did not react as though offended, nor blinked as though humiliated. He simply knelt slowly, as if every joint were asking, "Again?" and placed the XM4 rifle on the ground with more care than a father laying his child's photograph on an altar. It was the first time many in the camp truly noticed him. Before, he'd been a wandering shadow appearing silently one Monday morning in a faded pickup, wearing a neon orange 1992nd cap and oversized boots no modern soldier would don. They called him Pop, not because they knew his name, but because he looked like he could be anyone's father if that father had served through 2 wars and habitually drank coffee from an old ammunition can. No one really understood why he was here. His name didn't appear on Alpha Platoon's official roster. No unit, no rank, no insignia, only a vague note from command. Pop will assist with assessments in special situations. Everyone assumed what that meant. Just keep the old man alive. Even Sergeant Harlan Rhodes, the drill sergeant cum Soviet PE instructor running the range, couldn't hide his frosty glare at Pop. To Rhodes, anything without a clear purpose was a burden. And Pop, with his stoop-back, measured speech and unhurried demeanor, fell outside every rulebook. He didn't request permission before entering the live-fire zone. He didn't explain when he gently adjusted a recruit's weapon stance, though the slight touch halted the drill team in awkward confusion. He spoke little, but his eyes recounted a lifetime of history. Torres, the youngest soldier in the unit, had been watching him since day one, not out of curiosity, but because Pop was the only person who rose earlier than he did. Every morning at 4:30, Pop sat beneath the eucalyptus by the parking lot, sharpening his knife on a stone and gazing eastward as if waiting for the sunrise to confirm something from yesterday. Stranger still, Torres's boots, whose laces had snapped 3 days earlier, suddenly gleamed, relaced in a proper combat knot, though no one admitted doing it. At first, everyone assumed he was a token, inspirational vet, brought in to boost morale. But he never spoke of spirit or honor. He never recounted his exploits. He simply sat, listened, and watched. And perhaps that unsettled people most. To young soldiers proving themselves with shouts, sweat, and bullseye scores, his silence wasn't a virtue, it was a threat. Someone who makes no effort to prove anything can often be the person you should fear most. Rhodes often joked behind his back he must have escaped from the VA hospital. A few laughed. The rest stayed silent, but not out of courtesy. Because, deep down, a question had begun to creep in. If he truly is someone, why does no one know?
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
No one assigned him a task. No one directed him what to do. Yet Pop was there every morning, exactly at 5 o'clock, always the first to arrive. He'd sit on the bench, sometimes nodding, sometimes sharpening the edge of a dagger so worn you could no longer tell if it was a weapon or a camping tool. Though unbidden, he watched, not with the curiosity of a bystander, but with the vigilance of a survivor scanning a room as if any detail could be a threat, or worse, the missing piece of an unhealed memory. He said nothing when the recruits fumbled to disassemble and reassemble their rifles during Wednesday's drill, but Torres noticed that after each brief appearance by Pop, that squad's performance noticeably improved. He wasn't sure whether Pop whispered advice, or that simply being near him made everyone understand. One night, high winds ripped the roof off Bravo Platoon's tent and sent supplies flying. By dawn, while everyone cursed and cleaned up, they discovered something strange. Every M4 was neatly stacked, dried off, and sealed in waterproof bags. No one admitted doing it. But Torres had seen Pop slip toward the tents at 3 o'clock, red flashlight in hand, his boots silent on the sand. That morning, Pop sat as usual. When Torres brought him a hot coffee, he only nodded in thanks. As he leaned forward, the strap of Pop's satchel fell open, revealing a small, round, time-tarnished object, a bronze badge etched with a crossed anchor and skull. The young soldier couldn't be mistaken. It was the SEAL Team 6 emblem, reserved for an elite few, never listed in official reports. Gabriel said nothing, but from that day on, he observed everything with heightened awareness. Pop never stepped into the firing range without first checking the wind direction. He never stood with his bare back in the sun, not for comfort, but to shield the jagged scar running down his left shoulder blade, as if surgically torn and hastily stitched. A combat wound, beyond doubt. He also never touched another man's weapon without permission. Yet once, when recruit Griggs dropped his XM4, Pop was the one who bent to retrieve it. He checked the safety, ejected the magazine, then returned it, each motion so swift that even Sergeant Rhodes glanced over. Fast, precise, flawless, and still, no one said a word. They didn't know what to make of him. Some guessed he'd been an armory technician. Others insisted he was merely a light infantry vet, half respectful, half diminishing. But gradually, everyone began to tread carefully around him. He never spoke of war. Yet, on a Friday afternoon, when Alpha Platoon practiced immediate reaction to an ambush scenario, he suddenly produced a hand-drawn charcoal map. A desert, 4 wind directions, 2 high grounds, and an exfil route. No one knew how he'd obtained it. It matched the actual training layout used by colonels for classified briefings. Rhodes flew into a rage, tore up the map and barked, "This is a training camp, not reminiscence therapy." But no one laughed. A few recruits exchanged glances. Gabriel's eyes stayed fixed on Pop, who simply sat, eyes devoid of reproach or excuse, just the look of one accustomed to being forgotten. His presence made everyone uneasy. At some point, whenever he entered the training area, conversation stopped, not out of respect, but out of fear of accidentally causing him pain. Even though no one had ever seen him shed a tear. One late afternoon, Torres noticed someone had lightly carved into the eucalyptus trunk by the parking lot bench. Pop's bench. It wasn't a joke. Someone wanted to mark the spot where he always sat, as if to stake a claim to the presence of a man who had outlasted the understanding of a younger generation. Can you guess what happens next? Take a moment to relax, comment 1 or "I'm still here" to keep listening. One morning like any other at Fort Irwin, except that day was unusually cold. Desert temperatures can be as strange as the people who live in them, gloomy, sluggish, yet always harboring something on the verge of explosion. Pop arrived early as usual, but that day he did not sit on the bench beneath the eucalyptus. He stood, standing straight, hands clasped behind his back, as if awaiting roll call. That silent posture made Gabriel Torres pause. He was all too familiar with Pop's leisurely strolls, or the occasional smile he'd offer a squirrel darting by. But on that morning, no smile graced his face. Only his eyes, no longer tired, but steeled in readiness. Sergeant Rhodes passed by and glanced at Pop as always, but this time his gaze froze, not because of Pop's demeanor, but because of his jacket. For the first time since he'd appeared, Pop wasn't wearing a civilian shirt. Instead, he wore a sand-colored windbreaker, frayed at the edges, bearing a triangular patch now too worn to read. On his chest, beneath a hastily resewn seam, was the arc of stitching where a name had once been removed. Someone had actually worn that jacket, and the name once there was no mere decoration. That day's exercise was a standard target recovery under fire, drill a routine scenario for new soldiers, yet enough to break a sweat even for the most confident. Recruits had to locate the ambush site, protect a fellow soldier playing the wounded, and move through the kill zone under simulated pressure. Torres was assigned the role of wounded soldier, the part everyone dreaded, lying motionless in the blazing sun while teammates hesitated over whether to rescue him. He lay there, goggles fogged, ears ringing from simulated explosions. And then, the simulation system glitched. A live round origin unknown slammed into the shield less than 5 feet from Torres. Everything went silent. The order to halt the exercise echoed. They suspected a hack. A technician rushed in to inspect. Rhodes barked into his radio, but his eyes never left one man. Pop. He had left the bench. He was standing beside Torres. No one saw him move. No one heard his footsteps. Yet in that chaos, he alone stepped toward danger. His hand gently settled on Torres's shoulder. No questions, no orders, only a look that said, "I'm here." It was then that Gabriel truly saw it. Pop's left wrist bore a long, hook-shaped scar, faded by time but still etched like part of a combat map. Torres had seen scars like that in books and photographs, and once on the arm of a special ops soldier under whom he trained. It was the stitch line from an old military restraint, a device used only in Black Ops missions, where even prisoners weren't officially acknowledged. Once the situation stabilized, the officer in charge ordered Pop out of the area. No one explicitly said, "You're not authorized," but their body language spoke volumes. He walked away, without protest, but without apology. The way he departed wasn't submission, it was acceptance of something he knew all too well, being pushed out of the place where he belonged. That night, the camp felt different. No one joked. No one referred to Pop as a harmless old-timer. His name suddenly carried weight. A few soldiers quietly inspected their weapons. Others cut their downtime short. As for Torres, when he returned to his bunk, he found tucked under his pillow a folded map, hand-drawn, pencil-sketched, markings no longer taught in standard training manuals. And alongside it, a single line, "Never save someone out of obligation, save them out of belief." How many like him have we abandoned simply because they didn't have to ask for help? They called it 5-on-1, but everyone knew it was an elimination drill. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood. Whoever was chosen as one was usually about to be cut from the program. This time, the one chosen was not a clumsy recruit, nor someone with poor performance. It was an old man. No record, no official assignment, no stated reason for his presence at the training camp. Pop. Lieutenant Colonel Carly Vernon ordered the drill to begin without explanation. Under Fort Irwin's June sun, no reason was needed. An order was an order. Sergeant Rhodes cast a half-smirk, half-sneer as Pop stepped into the empty courtyard. He still wore that battered windbreaker. No helmet, no wrist wraps, no preparation at all. Or perhaps the only preparation he needed was a lifetime of it. "Want to leave a final will?" Rhodes quipped, not loudly, but enough to draw a few stifled chuckles from distant recruits. Pop said nothing. He quietly retrieved a square-folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, carefully placed it in a weathered plastic tube, scribbled at the bottom, "San Miguel Camp." No one asked anything further. The whistle blew. In that instant, barely a heartbeat, no one reacted in time, yet the entire training field seemed to slow. Those who watched closely saw Pop lean his body at exactly a 15 degrees angle, lower his center of gravity as if stepping into zero-G, and then Delaney, the biggest of the group, charged forward like an unbraked truck. His mass and momentum were aimed right at Pop's chest. A hit would have broken ribs, but Pop was no longer there. He pivoted a quarter turn, his hand sweeping behind Delaney's neck as if brushing away a mosquito, yet Delaney's body folded like a snapped wooden post. Marston and Briggs closed in from both flanks. A textbook pincer move, 2 angles locking in, but Pop had vanished again. As they lunged, Pop slipped back, one beat not backward, but sideways swift as a leaf caught on a gust. They collided. Knee met knee. Training rifles clattered to the ground. A heel spin. A low sweep. Then a light tap behind Marston's neck. Precise, leaving only astonishment in his eyes. Briggs took a strike to the knee. Not hard, but exact. He staggered down, cursing under his breath so quietly no one caught the words. The 2 remaining Novak and Rhodes only then realized this wasn't a game, nor an easy comeuppance for a stubborn old man. They were up against a fighting style no longer taught. Rhodes sprang in. His movement was tight, confident, perfect training posture. But Pop did not meet force with force. He waited. Studied Rhodes's breathing, footwork, the slight shift of his shoulder before a strike. And when Rhodes spun for a low kick, Pop tilted his body by half a breath, raised his arm not to block, but to arrest the motion. His hand touched Rhodes's shoulder, and the massive soldier froze mid-strike as though his power had been drained. Only Novak remained. He did not attack. He stood still, fist clenched, not trembling, but unmoving. Then he relaxed, not out of fear, but because he understood. No one was seriously hurt, no blood, no stretcher needed, but something far heavier lingered. The silence. The silence that falls when people realize they've just witnessed something that shouldn't exist. A skill from another era, another generation, a class of people unlisted in official registers yet defining the rules. Pop did not smile, nor did he look triumphant. He simply surveyed each man quickly, quietly, as though he were still responsible for them, even after they'd tried to bring him down. Gabriel Torres did not blink through the whole bout. He did not roar applause or shout. He simply stood, fists at his sides, and, for the first time, understood why some are called living ghosts. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next segment that will leave you speechless. Take a second to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see viewers joining us from all over the world. No one spoke. No one moved from their positions. Fort Irwin, normally alive with shouts, whistles, and training, suddenly fell into what could only be described as stunned silence. Pop stood in the center of the training ground, unmoving, without flaunting victory or awaiting acclaim. The sun beat down on him like molten lead, yet he did not flinch. Sweat traced down his worn collar, mingling with the desert dust. He bent to retie his bootlaces, then quietly moved from one fallen soldier to the next, not to gloat over trophies, but to ensure they were okay. Delaney still lay on the sand, eyes wide, unable to grasp how he'd been felled so swiftly. Marston was up, propped by Pop, who checked his shoulder and gave a reassuring pat on the back. Briggs sat against a water barrel, clutching his knee, eyes a mix of shame and wonder. Novak had not been touched, but that only made the blow to his pride more profound. Pop said nothing to them. He did not linger. He simply went through the motions as though this were his duty, not for triumph, but out of responsibility. His gentle care made the scene feel less like a victory and more like a small aftermath, where survivors returned to tend to those who once confronted them. Torres had not moved. He stood there, feet seeming frozen into the sand. The feeling was neither shock nor awe. It was a silent remorse, realizing he'd shared space with someone extraordinary and never once addressed him by his proper name. Rhodes, the loudest laugher, was the last to leave the field. He did not admit anything, but his steps slowed, his glare lost its edge. A small cut marked his cheek caused by collision. Not Pop, but it would remain as a discreet sign that donning a uniform does not guarantee one understands what it means to be a warrior. That afternoon, Pop did not appear on his usual bench. Torres searched the camp, even into the old supply sheds, until he found him cleaning each of the black plastic training rifles heavier than the real thing used for reflex drills. Torres approached without a word. Pop handed him a rag and motioned for him to help. Not a request, not an order, just a silent sharing. Beside the weapons rack sat a weathered wooden ammunition crate, its lid slightly ajar. Inside, amid rusty maintenance tools, lay a brown leather notebook, no name on its cover. But within, each handwritten line, blurred by moisture, read, "Hold the line, watch the wind, always keep an exit, but never abandon the fallen." Torres did not dare ask. Yet he knew this notebook was not written for Pop. It was written so he would not forget. That evening, when the recruits assembled as scheduled, for the first time, Pop did not sit at the edge. He stood behind Gabriel, by the back row. A few glanced his way. No one laughed. Some offered a slight nod, as if an unspoken apology was being conveyed. There was no ceremony, no roll of honor, but everyone knew that, over the course of this training camp, this moment had drawn an invisible line, before Pop and after Pop. How many like him trained to survive in silence, only to be forgotten within that same silence? A day after the 5-on-1 bout, Fort Irwin was nearly silent. No whistles, no drill commands, no familiar clatter of weapons. It was as though the training ground, with its dust and scorching sun, held its breath to absorb something beyond words. Rhodes did not return to the drill field that day. His arm was in a cast, hanging limply. Some said that when he reached medical, he spoke not a word, only requesting a private corner without mirrors. Perhaps to avoid seeing himself. Or perhaps to finally see someone else. Delaney, Briggs, and Marston all went through medical checks. No fractures, no serious injuries. Yet all three were absent from the morning roll call for the first time ever. Pop, however, was present, seated on his usual bench. But that day he held no knife, did no whittling or repairs. He simply sat as part of the landscape, still, enough that anyone passing by would pause for an extra beat. Gabriel Torres emerged from the supply sheds carrying a small notebook, not the training log, the one he'd seen Pop scrawl in. Now Gabriel carried it not as a prized object, but as if safeguarding someone's fading memory. He approached the bench without a word, sat beside Pop, and placed the notebook gently on his lap. Pop did not look at the book, nor at Gabriel. Yet he smiled the kind of smile that needs no sound, no effort. It was like the sun sliding beneath the horizon, slow, certain, and unstoppable. By midday, under the high sun, the unexpected happened. Delaney, the largest of the group, quietly stepped into the yard. Marston followed, then Briggs. Dressed not in fatigues, but in light athletic gear, still noticeably sore. One by one they approached Pop, said nothing, simply nodded, as if yesterday's falls had taught them a lesson no manual could. Respect is proven, not demanded. A while later, Lieutenant Colonel Vernon emerged from the main compound. She did not approach, nor call anyone over. She merely observed, one hand in her pocket, the other flipping through her drill roster, as if searching among the names for justification for what she'd witnessed. Suddenly, she signaled to a group of technicians. They moved to the concrete wall at the far end of the yard, where fitness tests began. One technician carefully removed the old sign, Echo 7, Phase 2 Start, and replaced it with a new one. Same wording, but below in small letters freshly engraved. In honor of the ones who don't speak, but never stop standing. Pop did not turn his head, but Gabriel saw his hand clench. Not trembling, not uncertain, just a natural reflex when someone refuses to be erased. That evening, at the light dinner before curfew, for the first time since arriving at camp, Pop entered the mess hall. No invitation, no announcement, yet no one stopped him. Delaney slid out a chair. Marston silently handed him a food tray. From a corner came the gentle tap of spoons against stainless steel cups. The sound grew quietly, unforced, a slow rhythm, like the heartbeat of a collective spirit, in silent solidarity and respect. Shortly afterward, Pop left the camp. No one knew why, no official transfer orders. But Torres, the only one Pop had patted on the shoulder before departing, received a small care package a few days later. Inside was a folded note, the handwriting growing steadier, then hurried, as if the writer lost patience with himself. It read, simply, "There are things that need no proof, only someone to remember." Sometimes, the greatest among us do not stand on podiums of glory, but sit quietly in a corner unnoticed. They need no titles, no accolades. They only need a single, true gaze, someone patient enough to recognize the dignity hidden beneath worn gear and scars that never tell their story. Pop's tale is not merely an 83-second fight. It's a reminder that while we may misjudge others, having the courage to make it right defines a community of character. If you've ever known a Pop in your life, someone underestimated but who changed your perspective, tell their story in the comments. And if this story has stirred something in you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who might need healing. Because sometimes, one well-timed story is enough to show someone they're still seen,